through ratchet strap on one side. Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Chasing 518. On this week's episode, throw some tubes on the front of the chassis. Let's get started. These are the CAD drawings associated with this chassis, and they show all of the additional tubing. It's all the extra tubes that need to go in to make this a race chassis and really strengthen it up. So Carlos left all those out because we knew, based on my suspension, shock packaging, engine, exhaust configuration, that some of those might need to get changed and modified a little bit. So this is a rough outline for me of what I'm trying to do as far as triangulation and strengthening up the front end. And I'm gonna make some accommodations based on my current setup. What I got done last night was I added these two tubes first. So I thought they'd look best if I kept them in line with the intrusion bar and give me adequate clearance next to the shock. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut a bar to go across as an engine brace. That'll be this one here. I'll end up putting some tube couplers like these in, same ones I used for the front bumper. Those will get placed like there, and that will let me take out the center section so that when the engine needs to come out of the car, I can get it out. So let's grab a piece of 120 wall and get some measurements and see if we can get that tube cut and notched. Normally I'll only Scotch-Brite the tube back far enough to notch it and weld it, but because this cross tube's going to get tube couplers put in it, I'm not entirely sure where, and I'm not sure what else is going to intersect it, I went ahead and just cleaned the whole tube. This is my best guess at an angle to go across, so I'll use that as my notch, 64.5 degrees. Set up the notcher and get going. Okay, I ended up taking maybe an 1/8 inch off one side. I like it. It's still pretty tight to the coil spring buckets, and I have just a touch of gap because I missed my angle a little bit. So I'm just gonna hand profile the long side of the tube, and that should tighten up the gaps on the front, and then that'll also slide the tube forward probably just ever so slightly, which I think is all I need. Then I need to decide, my experience with putting couplers in before on my old car was, you cut this, you put couplers in, so now you've got 1 weld, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 welds, and then when the welds shrink, it's basically impossible to get the chassis It's impossible to get that bar in and out. I'm tempted to figure out where I want the couplers, put them in on the bench, and then put the whole assembly in and weld it so that I have less warpage or shrink when I weld. I'm gonna fine tune this and then think about it. Got it trimmed up pretty good. The tube fitment's really nice all the way around. The gaps are all even. It's parallel to the dash bar. So I think what I'm gonna do, I was thinking about these tube couplers and putting them in now. I don't know entirely where they're gonna go until I get some of the other tubes in place, because there's gonna be a tube coming down from here down to the lower rail. I want that near the bump stop. So I feel like if I put these in now, it'd be a mistake. So what I'm gonna do is just tack weld this bar in. It'll keep holding the front end together. And then wherever I think they're gonna go later, I can cut it. I can fully weld 1/2 in and then, you know, make this intersection. I think I could do it. I think based on what I learned, so what it was I made a removable bar on the tail of the old car. I think it's that bar right there. I made removable. And when I welded all 6 of those joints, it pulled together so tight that to get that tube in or out, I had to put ratchet straps on the back of the car and pull it together. It was a pain in the butt, but I think I learned from that, and I think I can weld this one better. Maybe even like if I get a TIG welder by then and I TIG weld it, maybe it won't pull as bad. I just want to keep laying tubes out, so I'm going to tack this one in place and move on. I record this every time I make a video, and when I edit it, my anger is gone and I delete it. I feel like posting it this time. This GoPro battery is in the green, shows 49%, yet it turned off while I was filming the welding because it said it ran out of battery. What the heck? I need a better garage filming camera. The GoPro's good for the stabilization stuff, but I don't need any of that in the garage. So I need to figure out what I need to film in the garage. Do I use my iPhone? What do I do? Let me know. I'm so sick of this GoPro. Pulled my taped on piece of aluminum that was for my plumb bob, so I could get my axle centered, because now I can plumb bob off of this tube if I need to, if I move any of my link lengths. Gonna go ahead and cut this piece of scrap tube off. I think with the bumper constructed and tacked in place, and this tube in here, that I've got enough stability now. I don't need this. And then I'm gonna go ahead and figure out how I want to strengthen the nose of the car in this upper area. As much as I wanted to keep laying out tubes here in this front section, I really need to just focus on, because the winch has to go here. I'm not entirely sure what I want all that to look like yet, and I don't have to make it. What I do need to make, though, is some permanent mounts for the upper shocks. And I've got 2 tubes to land the mounts on, so I'm going to set up the camera, probably throw it in time lapse. Yet another random GoPro shut off. I have no idea when it turned off, but I'm gonna mark where the shocks are, front to back, left to right, and then pull all this off. And then I'm gonna start figuring out what I wanna do as far as leave the shocks with the hoses coming out the front, spin them around, have the hoses come out the back. Not really sure what's gonna work best yet, but I need to mark where they are location-wise currently. That way I don't lose that reference, because I know this is the location where it doesn't interfere with the tire or the chassis or anything throughout travel. And then start kind of mocking some stuff up with some cardboard and templates and see what I can make. Throw it on time lapse for you guys. turned the camera off because I was trying to decide how I wanted to clock or orient the shocks. And this is essentially what I came up with the fittings, the hoses coming off the back. However, that's going to conflict with exhaust and all these other things. I already loosened these and spun them. Talked to ADS. They said, go ahead and pull the hoses off, save all the fluid. So I'm draining this one out. The fluid's brand new. And then I went and bought just some JIC-8 caps to cover the shocks, to keep them clean. And yeah, so I'll drain both shocks, get the caps on them, and then proceed. And then when I'm all done, and I decide where I'll mount the reservoirs. Once I've got all the tubes in the car, then I can have some custom hoses made that fit everything perfectly. Okay, drain some shocks. Got the caps on the shocks. Went ahead, just took some safety wire to locate them left to right. I'd kind of made some marks before I cut the old mounts off of kind of center line of the top, just to get me started. That's roughly where they'll be. A few inches above the hood line, which I was trying to avoid, but as low as I want the car to sit and as much travel as it has, that's just what happens when you got to package a big shock. Now, if you guys are following Carlos's build series on Striker 4, the chassis after mine, he put the dip back in the door bar, which was smart because that lets this tube climb at an uphill angle, which lets, as he rolls this nose tube, it has a kind of a hump to it before it transitions down again. So I don't know that he has that much altitude, but it definitely would make it easier to package the shocks in the hood line and make it kind of more aesthetically pleasing. But I had asked him specifically for a straight door bar, and this probably shows it pretty good. So you have to, you know, splice the tube and keep it going. And so unless you put like a drastic uphill bend in it right here to come up and over, that's what you end up with. So Carlos is, because his door bar is coming up right here, it'll swoop up and then back down. Make that a little bit easier to deal with. All right, I'm gonna get out some beer box cardboard and start making, I don't know, one side. Unfortunately, these are gonna have to be different because this tube is at a different height than this one. They're just not super symmetrical. So I don't know if that shows well, but there's a little bit of a twist in the nose right there that I'm gonna have to compensate for. So the templates left to right might end up being different. All right, let's get started. I don't know that it's the right way to do it, but it's what I do. Cardboard's pretty cheap. I just save every beer box every time I empty a 30 rack. So I crudely hack away at the first one, and then make some changes, make the second one, make some more changes, and hopefully this is the third one. I wanted to add a little more material over the top to make this more level with like hit the top of the car and the horizon. Give it a little more beef over the top so when I plate it, it doesn't hit the top of the shock tower. So I'll cut out number 3, try that, and hopefully that's it. Got the first one all done, cut out of metal. It's sitting out in my bucket of muriatic acid outside, stripping the mill scale off since I get this cheap steel out of the rim pile. The second one, or I should say the driver's side, if I take the passenger side template, this one, and I bring it over to the driver's side, I have one problem in that this side of the chassis sits a little bit higher than that side, and I think that was just a difficulty getting these rolled tubes to dive exactly the same for Carlos. So I need to make this one about a 1/4 inch shorter. So I'm trying to bring all the proportions down, bring this bottom edge down a 1/4, bring everything down, especially if I could get the top edge of these. If I lay a straight edge across both towers, it'd be nice if it zeroed out on a level. That way I start to bring all those little indiscrepancies and misproportions back. So I'm trying to create the lower, so that was it up here. So I think I want to bring it down on this plane. So I'm going to cut out this lower one and see how it fits and see how it lines up. All right, Madeline wanted to help me tonight, so she's working on one and I'm working on the other. She's my quality control sander. How's it looking?
Good.
Hold it up for everybody. Is it a boomerang? Mm-hmm. Making boomerangs. All right, I got the second one roughed out, so now I gotta grind it to fit good and drill the hole in it. And then I think I know I'm out of weld washers. I made a couple last time I needed some, so I might see if I can find some material to make some more weld washers. Upper shock mount day 2. I forgot to order more weld washers from Rough Stuff, but I've got a lathe, so I made some. Made 4 because I'll end up putting one on each inside. Where the bolt's got more shear surface to beat itself against so it doesn't oval out this plate. These will get welded to the inside of the plate. I think I'm at a point where I'm ready to put the weld washers on the 2 brackets I made and then tack weld them to the car, cycle the suspension, see if there's any clearance issues. I know I did lean them back a little bit more than they were, and I hope that's not a problem. Now that I've got the brackets tacked onto the car, I want to cycle the suspension and make sure that I didn't miss anything. I know I laid the shocks back a touch, and my biggest concern is that when whatever side's high and turned all the way, that I might have gotten too close to the spring, but I won't know until I cycle it. I also know that this is too flimsy by itself, so I think what I'm gonna do is just take some scrap metal and just tack weld it from the tower down to the chassis. And that way I should be able to, with these tight, I should be able to start articulating the car and make sure that all my clearances are still good. through ratchet strap on one side so that I could articulate it and check clearance. Spring's gonna sit as wide as this collar or slider back here, so that's just about it right there off the tire. There's still no brake rotor or anything. That spaces it out another 1/4 inch. And then over here we've got just bare minimum finger width in there. I think it's gonna work. Okay, now that I've articulated it and turned it, feel a lot better about those mounts. I think I'll go ahead and make the inside ones. All right, bring it back down and get started. That's the end of this week's video. I hope you guys liked it. Got a couple tubes in, got the shock mounts off to a good start. I gotta get cleaned up and get ready to go to work tomorrow. Thanks for watching. See you guys next week.